Morning guys, how are you?
Good.
Okay, my story is not unlike those people who suffer from mental illness. I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how I came to be diagnosed. First, I'd like to say that my childhood was fairly normal as far as children are concerned. I spent a lot of time by myself, alone, usually doing things that interested me, playing music, reading, doing puzzles and things like that. So, I mean, although I was in school, I spent most of my free time alone, but I am from a large family. I came to Canada in 1978. I graduated from high school in 1981. The following semester I went to university, the fall of 1981. I had a girlfriend, my first girlfriend in 1981, and the relationship, maintaining the relationship along with schoolwork was very difficult. And into the relationship into 1982, it became difficult to manage both work, school, and relationships. So my grades slipped, but I still maintained the necessary grades to stay in school. At the time, I was studying computer science, and I graduated with that in 1990. But back to the spiral, into 1983, it came to my attention that some of my thoughts began to appear skewed and disorganized. And by the spring of 1984, I was engaged in what's called an acute psychosis. Psychosis is a term referring to not living in reality. It's a term where, it's a term meaning you have no connection to the real world. What you think in your head has no basis in reality. Anyway, the relationship I was in ended in 1982, and I tried to shake the feelings associated with this person, but it was not working, and I slipped deeper and deeper into psychosis. I dropped out of school in 1984 and began dabbling in pot smoking. At this time, I set my sights on the arts, music, drawing, painting, writing. I bought a piano, and I basically shut myself off, and I submerged myself in my schoolwork, my piano, my writing, and did very little social activities. I dropped out of school in 1984, like I said, but my goal after the relationship was to gain entrance into the co-op program, which is a work-study program at the University of Regina. I failed to my disappointment, and this, I believe, was one of the major factors into my so-called spiral into a very dark period of my life. And so the drug use began and continued along with the psychosis. By the spring of 1985, I was experiencing enormous emotional volatility, emotional unsettling feelings, and I reported to Regina General Emergency Room. There I was given a shot of antipsychotics, which is a medication to calm you down so you respond in a more natural and normal way to your surroundings. I returned to studies in 1986, in the winter of 1986, winter semester. However, the drug use continued, and I kept fading in and out of psychosis. There were times when I'd miss 2 weeks of school, resulting in barely passable grades. The college at the university through which I was registered did all they could to help an otherwise disastrous situation. And now I'm looking back at my hospitalization. I was diagnosed with a drug-induced psychosis, which is not a pretty thing, which was later qualified as paranoia. This diagnosis was later reversed, and the proper diagnosis was labeled schizophrenia, as it turned out to be. I spent most of the 90s working on simple jobs. I even worked at a few IT jobs in information technology, which is computer programming. However, I did not last very long there, largely because my routine was skewed. I did not have the mental strength to tolerate the stress associated with a job like that, so I was let go. The illicit drugs I've used in various chapters of my life vary from cannabis, narcotics, psychedelics, and some have advocated in a romantic way that these help them during the creative process. Personally, it did not help me, and I don't believe it helps anyone in any kind of situation. It just precipitates a disastrous and perilous situation. At this time, I'd like to mention that drug use does not cause mental illness, but if you have the biological makeup such that you have a negative reaction to the drug you're taking, you will develop a mental illness. Throughout the 90s and into 2000, I was still using illicit drugs, however I managed to stay relatively sane, executing my tasks at work somewhat adequately. I still enjoy art, math, music, computer science, and I do these things in a way that they will benefit me in the capacity that I'm able to function in that environment. A little explanation about my delusions and symptoms. They're what is called thought insertion, thought extraction. Thought insertion is thinking that someone's putting a thought in your head. Thought extraction, thinking people are reading your mind and taking thoughts out of your head. There's also hearing voices, which are generally categorized as audio hallucinations, where you hear a voice, you don't know the source of it, but some people respond to it, some people question it, some people do nothing about it. In my situation, I do a little bit of questioning the thought, the voice in my head. I never really act on it, or sometimes I just read a book and it distracts me from the voices in my head. I'd like to set some light on a new development in neurosciences. That is the attention of researchers, that some persons with mental and cognitive challenges are gifted in some way. This is very rare. You might have seen A Beautiful Mind. He had John Nash, he's a brilliant mathematician. He had these kinds of problems and he pulled through, and he won the Nobel Prize for economics. And so it's not totally hopeless having this illness. It's not necessarily a living death sentence. There are ways and avenues to address it, and with the knowledge we have in today's medical field, we can address this in a proper and a humane way. Okay, now my drug use has ended. I'm self-medicating, which is basically using illicit drugs to deal with the way you feel, because it's generally not a pleasant feeling. Like I said, I still enjoy the arts, poetry, writing, playing music, reading, things like that. I think I've come a long way since my first episode. Episode is referred to a breakdown or a psychotic break where you're not well and they have to put you in the hospital, in the psych ward, so you can recover and heal and move on with your life. This is my first episode. In 1985, I think I've come a long way, and thanks for everything for being in Canada, that I could actually get proper health care. Since Canada has probably outside of Sweden, has probably one of the best psychiatric healthcare facility or mandates or services available to people like myself. Looking back, I should mention, when these things happen, they're very stressful, they're very hard on your family, and they don't understand what it is, you don't understand what it is, only the doctor, and this could make dialogue with your peers, your siblings, your family, people you look up to, anybody in a position of authority. You might think that they're out to get you, so you react to them in a negative way. So anyway, but in terms of relationships of the opposite sex, it hasn't been for a while. I'm a person of faith. I find it comforting, and it provides moral values which can apply to my everyday life. Over the past few years, I have studied computer science on the technical level, and currently I work in peer support with mental health, and I do some research in mathematics at the university, and I'm trying to move on from here, and just the prognosis for me looks good because I've chosen a healthy and healthy lifestyle that will meet my needs and maintain my proper mental health. Thank you.
So I'm going to give you just a bit of a family perspective. My name's Jackie, and I work at the Schizophrenia Society of Saskatchewan in Regina, and my main role there is a partnership program coordinator. But I also have a sister who has bipolar, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about her story, just to give you kind of the family perspective of it. Just an ordinary day, I got a call from my sister. She's my favorite sister, actually. She's my younger sister, and she used to come over and babysit my girls, and you know, we would hang out together quite a bit. So one day I got a call from her, and she wanted to come over, but it was really early in the day, so I asked her if she wouldn't mind if I had my cup of coffee and stuff first, and then I would give her a call. Because she didn't drive at the time, I'd have to go and pick her up. So I called her back a little bit later, about an hour or so later, and it was a very different conversation. This time she sounded really, really tired and very, very far away, very distant sounding. So I asked her what was wrong, and she said she was just tired, no big deal. And I said, okay, well, why don't you have a nap? And so she did, and then I called her back another couple of hours later. And again, it was a very different conversation. This time she was crying on the phone, she was talking really fast, she was really stressed and anxious. And I could hear her boyfriend in the background. He was saying things like, you need to come clean with the family, you need to tell them what's been happening. So again, I asked my sister what was wrong, and this time she admitted that the marijuana that she had smoked was laced with crystal meth, and that she thought she was addicted to crystal meth now. This came as a complete shock to me. I'd never even seen her have a glass of wine or anything like that, so for her to be doing drugs was quite a shock for me. So I knew at that point I couldn't pick her up and bring her over to my house, so I phoned my mom, and my mom went over to my sister's house. And then I ended up getting a call from my mom this time saying that she couldn't get my sister to calm down or go to the doctor or go to the hospital. So by that point I had someone to look after my kids, and I headed over to my sister's house. When I got there, her boyfriend was sitting in the living room chair, and he was sitting there, and then he'd get up, and then he'd sit back down, and there was a lot of hand gestures, like he was moving his hands quite a bit, and he was talking fairly fast. And he was telling me about all these grand gestures that he had done for my sister and for their love affair that they had, these just really grand things that they were so amazing, so wonderful that he did. But they were of a criminal nature. They were things that you can get arrested for, and so I'm thinking, okay, that's not right. So he was also concerned. He figured that there was an arrest warrant issued for him, and the cops were on their way to come and pick him up, and he was scared of the cops. He didn't want to be handcuffed and put into a police car. So I listened to him, and we talked it over, and he agreed that the best thing for him to do was to go down to the police station and turn himself in, find out if there was an arrest warrant, because the fear of not knowing was so much greater than actually going down there. So he agreed to that. So at that point I turned my attention to my sister, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with my mom, and she was also doing a lot of very fast talking, and she'd get up to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. By the time she got halfway there, she'd forget, and then come back down and sit, and then tell us the whole thing over again, like she was doing a lot of repeating. So the things she was saying too is, this is one of the things that she was talking about, is that she and her boyfriend were like a modern day Romeo and Juliet, and the reason they were Romeo and Juliet is because her father was a member of a biker gang, and her boyfriend's father was a member of a rival biker gang, and if the two of them stayed together, there'd be a huge biker war in Regina, and lots of people would get hurt, and it would be all their fault. Well, if you know the story of Romeo and Juliet, it's a double suicide, so this started to get me quite worried, like that's almost like talking about suicide. So I knew I needed to get her to the hospital, so we ended up getting them in different cars, and we went down to the police station, made sure he was speaking with an officer, her boyfriend, that he was safe, and then we took my sister to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, she expanded on which I know now is a delusion, the biker theory that she had. And she said I wouldn't have to worry about myself or my daughters because biker gangs protect the female line, that's how they make more biker people. Well, at that point, I'm thinking, okay, this is definitely a delusion because my background is in psychology, so I knew what that was when she started talking like that, because I knew who my father was. There's no way he was in a biker gang. He couldn't have been with the job that he was doing. So, she ended up staying there. We were there for quite a while. Eventually got to see a doctor, and she wanted me to come into the doctor's room with her because she was scared of the doctor. So I went in, and it was kind of interesting because as soon as the doctor walked in, all of a sudden she stopped talking. Like she was doing all this rapid talking just constantly, and then the doctor walks in and she stopped. And the only thing she'd tell the doctor is that she was concerned that the marijuana that she had smoked was laced with crystal meth and that she might be addicted, so she agreed to a drug test. She did also say that she felt like bugs crawling on her too. The drug test came back with a very, very tiny amount of marijuana in her system, and nothing else, no alcohol, no crystal meth, no other drugs. And they told me that meant that there was a chance that she had smoked it months ago, and it was just the trace left over from that. So it wasn't the drugs that was causing her illness, something else was going on. So she's a smoker, and we were still in the emergency ward at that point, so she wanted to go outside for a cigarette, and the minute she got outside, she bolted and ran. We did find her. She did show up at her place the next morning, but that was a very long night for the family, worrying about her because we couldn't find her. So she refuses to go back to the hospital or to go to see a psychiatrist. Or well, she did go see a psychiatrist after that one time, and he gave her a diagnosis of depression. For somebody that's bipolar, if you give them an antidepressant, which is to treat depression, what you end up doing is kicking them into what we call mania, where they start to do that manic, and it's that scary stage where they're running, their mind's racing, going, and thoughts are coming so fast, and they'll do that rapid talking that I was kind of talking about earlier. So she went into that quite a bad manic stage, so she that's why she refuses to see a psychiatrist right now. She is actually doing really well. She's working with her family doctor, which she trusts, and she's taking mood stabilizer through him because he can prescribe them, and she's also seeing a psychologist. So she's doing quite well. Like, she's getting what she needs. She just doesn't want to see a psychiatrist right now. So and sometimes in the earlier stages, even like in Mark's story, it takes a while to accept these illnesses. You know, it's hard to understand why you have to take medication every day and why you have this. So she's not at that stage of really accepting yet, but she knows that what she's doing is making her feel better, so it's working. So maybe at some future point she will go back to see a psychiatrist. So that's kind of my sister's story. What I'm going to do now is we're going to play that audio. I'm going to play my iPod for you, and on there is an example of voices.
These auditory hallucinations may be triggered by stress and often consist of hostile, demeaning voices that command the patient to do or say harmful things. To help you better understand the nature of these hallucinations, we have created this experiential simulation called virtual hallucinations. The tape you are about to hear contains an example of the voices and sounds a person with schizophrenia might hear while attempting to function in a job interview situation.
I always know when the cabinet part comes when I do it off.
I did not say that.
Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do with you guys now is we're going to do an exercise. I don't know if you want that recording off for this, or it's up to you. You can leave it running. Okay. So we're going to break you into groups of 4 or 5, and one person in each group is going to play the role of somebody experiencing hallucinations. Another person is going to play the role of somebody asking questions, like a job interview, or just anybody asking questions. And I've got lists of questions here. You don't have to stick to this list, but it's just so, to help you guys out with the exercise. You can ask a math question or whatever you'd like. Now the 2 or 3 remaining people in your group are going to be voices. Here's where you guys can have some fun. You should be probably laughing during this too, okay? So the voices, your job is to get the attention of the person that's experiencing hallucinations. So you want to really get their attention because you're their hallucination, right? So you can answer the question of the interviewer, you can do rambling sentences like, why are you wearing purple socks? You know, every time you put purple socks on with green underwear, you're going to end up with West Nile. You know, so, or tell jokes if you want, or talk about what you watched on TV last night, or something on YouTube, or whatever it may be. And my one rule is you have to stand up for this, okay? So I'll get you guys all to stand up and break into those groups, and I'll give the yeah, you gotta stand up, I know, it's early. Okay, so. Okay, yeah. Why don't you guys give yourself a little bit of room, maybe come over here, okay, away from the table. I'll just show you guys how to set up the visitor here, so that you can see if you just pay attention for a few minutes. Okay, so who's doing the role of somebody that's having hallucinations? Sarah. Okay, so Sarah, come stand here. And face the person that's asking the questions. No, face her. Okay, now you guys are voices, so you come in and divide, okay? Okay,